everybody, and welcome to another Zoom into Books presentation from Headline Books Publishing. Today we are talking with award-winning author Don Stansberry, who has written novels, middle grade, as well as some children's books. So today we're going to focus on his novels, specifically Secret Blood and Vulture Bend. So welcome, Don. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is all new for me. I'm enjoying this, though.
Great. It's a lot of fun, and it's nice to be able to share your book with some people who wouldn't normally get to see you at an in-person event. So this is a great way we found to reach lots of new audiences. So we're happy that you came on today.
Well, I hope I represent myself well. I hope I represent Headline Books well. And, I'm not used to it. It's for me, it's like talking to a piece of plastic. At least I get to see you. I have trouble even going through drive-throughs because I look at the plastic and I completely lose my train of thought. So that I can see you, I can see your reaction, and I'm very comfortable with you. So hopefully we'll be okay.
I think we will. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. So we are going to start talking about one of your novels, Secret Blood, first. And we do actually have a few slides that we'd like to share with you all today. So we're going to go ahead and pull up the slideshow. And while we get that going, Don, could you tell us a little bit about Secret Blood?
Well, it was an image that came to me about what would it be like if Jesus was on earth right now, right with us in the flesh. I know a lot of people think he's here with us now anyhow, but in terms of an actual human being here, and whether you're spiritual or religious or completely the other direction, this is a person that really did all our government. Everything we do is kind of based on, the life and the teaching. So I wondered what it would be like to have him here. So the story is kind of concocted around that, about how we would bring Jesus. I could get him here in a novel. And cloning to me was a very fascinating thing, still is. And that's what I used in the story.
Great. It's a great premise. So one thing in the book that I know that you've talked about before, there's a looming comet or star in the book. Can you tell us a little bit about the research you did to make this real for the reader?
Oh yeah, I did. I probably did more research for this book than anything I've ever done. For me, it was very interesting. I like doing the research. Well, we went through all kinds of things. We wanted to increase the plot, increase the tension in the plot, so there was a timeline where things had to come together. I talked to a lady, Tony DeVore, who was our science director for our county school system. And I went in and she gave me some places to look to find out things that could happen in the sky. So I kind of took some of those things and combined them all into one giant thing where, the earth was kind of in trouble. You didn't know exactly what it was. The government didn't know how much to let out, how much information to let out. And it was just basically a thing to increase the tension of the characters.
That's great. And it's always great to base novels on real things and real research. That's wonderful. We can go ahead and advance to the next slide here. And there's something else in Secret Blood. The Beatles. So how did the Beatles influence you during the writing of this book?
Well, I've always been influenced by the Beatles in everything I do. But I needed one thing for the end of the story. I knew I needed one thing that would bring all the world together. And I tried to think of one, you have Muhammad Ali that was a world famous character. You have Michael Jordan. Then I thought of things that are emotional, and I thought of music, and I thought, well, this at the end of the story would bring everybody together. Great.
Again, pull from something that people know.
Well, yeah, I mean, even people that don't know the music, I think they know the rhythm or the chant at the end of "Hey Jude."
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it kind of culminates in New York City, but it culminates around the world too. But New York City with Strawberry Fields and Central Park, it kind of all came together for me.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Can you, if you can see the picture there in the slide, can you talk a little bit about this picture and how it's relevant to the story?
Yeah, for me, it was very interesting when I started doing research. and I started going into the cloning component of it, I started researching Mary Magdalene. And it was strange because, of the way I had envisioned the story, all these portraits of her by the masters, the great artists, most of them had her with a alabaster jar, and I realized it was for a different reason, but at that time it fit into my story so well. So that was how the holy blood was transferred from the tomb on out down through history. So the alabaster jar became a very focal point in the beginning of the story.
So much research. We can go ahead and advance to the next slide here.
Well, basically, the whole book is the story of the priest, the facts, the story of this whole clone, because nobody knew about it, drops into his lap from an old lady's confession, and he's faced with this knowledge that the government has cloned Jesus, and it had happened 30 some years ago. He doesn't know who to take this information to, so he thinks, well, if he goes to the church, the hierarchy of the church, it's so horrible, the whole thing may get buried. But so, through some of the research I did, if you go back and look, there are a lot of priests right there with the Nazis. I mean, they are right together. And then after that, I found out that a lot of priests were outwitting the Nazis. They were providing exits for some of the Nazis who we wanted for our science programs. So when you see, priests giving the Heil Hitler, isn't always the fact that they're joining the Nazis, but they're actually sometimes tricking them into doing what they wanted to do. But I thought that was one of the interesting parts of the research. But anyhow, this priest comes through, and he's really the focal point of the story, because it's almost like he's the Moses bringing Jesus back into everybody's life. And, he goes through the stages of not feeling that he's worthy, that this is something way beyond him.
Oh, yeah, that's a great parallel. All right, if you want to advance, we can advance to the next slide here.
Okay, I just got to think of, and again, I tried to put everything in today's society, what it would be like. So, you know how sometimes superficial we are and shallow. If it came out that Jesus was here, people would be wanting him to do book deals. They'd want to know what kind of clothes he wore. They want to know who he hung out with, what parties he'd go to. All the dumb things that our society does. I think that would be that was one of the major things that I wanted to look at, how he would handle all that, and how we would handle that as a society. So, he in the book, this is all kind of done undercover because it's a political hot potato. The government and the president doesn't want to come out and say this has happened, because what if it's all fake? What if it's not true? And they don't want to admit being part of the government, even though it happened 30 years before. That's not something you want on your resume, that, you were doing this kind of thing.
Exactly. We can go ahead and advance to the next slide here.
Okay, you got me there.
That's a nice picture, isn't it?
It is, and it just kind of, to me, just looking at it right there, it just kind of looks at all the little tentacles and in the veins that go out from finding, something as monstrous as this is actually, trying to clone the blood of Jesus.
Oh, right, yeah. We can advance to the next slide here.
Again, there's one part in the book where Jesus, or not, the clone is Emmanuel, and nobody knows if he even knows who he is or who he isn't. So there's one part where he asks the priest to give him communion, which would be like consuming his own body. So there's so many little trickle down things in like this that I think that, I'd like to explore in the book.
Right, yeah, those are just some heavy concepts when you start to really think about them. We can go ahead and advance to the next slide.
And again, I wanted to put something in space that it made it look like, we can, how society is, we kind of slouch things off until it gets serious. And this thing coming through space. They called it the ghost because it appeared in one part of the solar system, then it would appear in another part, and it was just all over the place. And it had done things that scientists had never figured out, you know. And then it became serious when people actually knew what was happening, when the country knew what was happening. So it kind of, like, say, ratcheted up the tension.
Gotcha. We can go ahead and advance to the next one here.
Again, just something else in space coming at you. They
It's
combine. They throughout the story, different strange things kept happening. When they were around the Emmanuel, who is the clone, things that come on the radio, like let's see, you know, just kind of rock religious songs. God gave us rock and roll, that kind of thing. Other things that happened where they look out and something happened, and it'd be father and son bakery. So there are all kinds of little things like that that kept giving the priests hope that this was something that was planned out all along. It wasn't really something somebody did by accident. This was part of destiny ever since the crucifixion.
Right, a grander plan. We can go ahead and go to the next slide here. And there's your Beatles tribute.
There is. You know, I did some things in the book that you're really not supposed to do in terms of, you know, literary concept, because some of the most important characters I didn't introduce until halfway through the book. And there was one child that was in kind of like a sanitarium, you know, a special school because he was autistic. But the only way he could be calmed down was to play Beatles music. And so that kind of entered the story at that point when he entered. And then that was real heavily through the end of the story.
Excellent. All right, we can advance to the next one here.
And again, the story kind of culminates in the in Central Park. I thought, you know, it's a place where almost everybody knows. People gather, a place where it's easy access because homeless people play a big part in this also. So it's a part where you might have a dozen homeless people and a dozen millionaires all together.
Oh yeah, that's very true. All right, we can see what's next here.
Again, with the kind of counterculture Beatles, you know, I think it's important to know too that since he was a political hot potato, the government was kind of keeping their hands off. They were doing everything real covertly. They didn't even want the president's advisor did not want the president to know anything. So everything was done real secretly. And they brought this priest back in to handle all the things secretly, to kind of take care of him until they figured out what was going on. So in the book, he is, through different parts of the community, he ends up being protected by this street gang that's trying to turn legal. Mm-hmm. So part of the humor through the book, now it sounds kind of heavy, sounds like a dark book, but it should be really uplifting. But through a lot of the humorous parts is the black street gang is protecting him.
All right, we can see what's coming up next.
Again, another thing outside with all the people. Now, in the book, it's a lot more chaotic than this because of, you know, the things coming in the sky. It's at the point now where they can actually see it, and there's a lot more panic.
Great. All right. So once again, everyone, we are here with award-winning author Don Stansberry, who's discussing his novel, Secret Blood. And I do have a couple more questions about this book, Don. So what kind of reactions have you had to this book? It's won several awards, which is great, including a win at the London Book Festival, which is fantastic. Has there been any pushback from the religious community or not?
No, really. My mother-in-law made me take the first copy to a priest. She thought everybody's going to get thrown out of the church. And the priest, the next time I saw him, he said I couldn't put it down. I thought it was great. He even had me do signings after Mass.
Oh, wow.
One of the funniest story or the best story was I was standing out. We have a Christmas parade through our town at Christmas, and I was standing on a street corner, and the mayor's car came by, and the mayor waved at me and said, "Love the book."
Oh,
So
that's
I thought
great.
that was great. That made me feel good that the mayor recognized me and complimented me on that.
That
The
is
only
great.
bad thing I've ever had was when we released the book in New York. A lady came up and she said, "Now this looks interesting. What's it about?" And I kind of just briefly told her the story. And I said, "It's not. It sounds dark, but it's really uplifting." And she just kind of dropped the book like it was going to burn her hands. So she goes, "No, it's not for me." So that's about the worst of it I've had. But anybody that's actually given it a chance has been really positive.
Great. Again, it's a story. I think you have to go into it thinking that it's fiction. So,
It does not, and that was part of the plan, was to leave the reader feeling uplifted.
exactly. And that, I mean, goes back to the fact that you said it's more of a feel-good book, which is always great. So with that being said, is there a sequel in the works, or is this a one hit?
I know my publisher has been pushing for one for a long time. Yeah, I did another book. I did Vulture Bend after that because I thought kind of the story was over after that. But so many people came up and said, "I'd really like the characters. I'd like to see more of them." So I have another idea. I've got about 100 pages of it finished. Uh, I don't know when or what, but I know the story. I think the story's pretty good. I didn't know if I could come up with another good story. It's mostly the characters. It's not a whole lot of Emmanuel in it. He just kind of pops in because I thought it'd be kind of cheesy to use Jesus to sell books over and over. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I have him as a guiding light for these people in times of moral conflict.
Great direction. Yeah. So some believed the Mayan calendar predicted the end of the world, December 21st of 2012. That happens to be the year that your book was released. So tell us about your interview on CNN about Secret Blood.
Well, Burke Allen, who is a great guy, got me the interview. Um, it was like it was the Mayan calendar, and because of the end of time kind of thing coming in the sky, and I'd done a lot of research on it. They had me on her show as an expert on end of times, which I wasn't really, but at least I got some airtime on it, and she seemed to enjoy the interview, and I really did. And
Yeah.
as soon as the Mayan calendar kind of fizzled out, that part of my professional life drizzled out with it.
Well, see, that just made room for your writing life to take over.
Oh, exactly, it did.
Yes. So you mentioned that you mentioned releasing the book in New York. So can you tell us a little bit about that and being at Book Expo America that year?
Yeah, it was it was really an eye-opening experience. I had not been to New York since I was a kid, um, and just being from West Virginia, looking for the stars, looking for the people. Um, Nelson DeMille was right there. I was right there with him. I saw him walk by him, recognized him, and he was just sitting by himself behind the stage. He was going to do some kind of panel discussion, so he was just sitting by himself. Um, one of my favorite actresses, I forget her name, was right beside me in the booth. She played solitaire in the
Is
James
it
Bond
Jane
movie.
Fonda?
No, no. She was Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman. What's her name?
Oh, Jane Seymour.
Jane Seymour was right there in the booth,
That's what
right
I was
there.
trying to think of.
And I thought, my goodness, it was great. It was like seeing a lot of people that we had, and the sad thing for me was I'm a huge David Letterman fan. I had tickets. I had ordered tickets for the show. We were in the audience, and it happened to be just at the exact same time as I was signing books at the festival, so I didn't get to go. But we walked by the theater and got to see a lot of things, and it was perfect. It was a great experience.
That's so exciting. So you do have another novel that we're going to talk about today called Vulture Bend.
Okay.
So can you give us a little bit of background behind that one?
Yes, Vulture Bend in a lot of ways is my favorite because I got to do two different things. It is a horror romance. So if you could imagine my attempt was to be Nicholas Sparks meets Stephen King. So we have two stories. I love having the two stories going together, two completely different things. One happens 40 years, starts 40 years before the serial murder starts 40 years before the romance starts. So we have a young couple. One guy's doing his student teaching. The other one is her first sub job at this school. They get together. Then there's this serial killer that's been going on for 40 years that nobody even knows that the cases are all connected. So he's operating on one story, and I go back and forth from the stories, and finally it happens that they kind of, the two stories collide.
Okay. All right, so once again, if you're just joining us on Facebook Live, we are chatting today with Headline Books award-winning author Don Stansberry. He's talking about his novels with us today, and right now we are discussing Vulture Bend. So with this book, who was your inspiration? Like, can you tell us a little bit about like your favorite authors? Like, is this a genre that you like to read?
Well, Stephen King, yeah. Stephen King's always my favorite guy. I'm just always amazed that he writes the stories as well, develops characters. And it seems like when I read his books, within every 10 pages, there's a word that I don't know. So I was just amazed that he can increase my vocabulary just by reading. The romance, you know, when I knew that I was going to start this book, I tried reading some of the books. I tried reading it, and I just couldn't read the romance books. I'm sure they're well written and they're good, but I know that this is not a good thing to say, but I am hooked on those Hallmark Christmas movies. I mean, I know they're dumb, but I start, you know how they're going to end, you know exactly what's going to happen, but we tape them and watch them. And I really enjoy it. So I wanted to have some kind of feeling like that now I will say, for me, it was completely different because for the first time, I had to write love scenes and I had to write some really grisly murder scenes. So, well, I read an interview with somebody, it was a horror writer, maybe it wasn't even a horror writer, but anyhow, they said that if you're going to show an evil character, you have a responsibility to the reader to show exactly how evil they are. So, it was J.K. Rowling said that.
Oh, wow.
So anyhow, I thought, well, if I'm going to show how evil this serial killer is, I really got to put in the blood and guts. So, and I think people are used to that. I'm not used to writing it as much, but I'm used to reading it because it seems like all the novels I read now either start with a murder or start with a crime. So
that is very true. And, with Hallmark movies, they're nice because sometimes you need something predictable and that is going to have a happy ending. So it's nice to pull, elements from those types of stories into books like this to kind of balance it out. So that was a great idea.
I kind of think so too. I mean, I really like the ones that I turn off are the ones where I really don't like the characters. But if you watch it and you even know it's going to end, if you like the characters, I keep watching.
Oh, yeah. So again, everyone, if you're just joining us, we are chatting with Don Stansberry, award-winning author from Headline Books. If you have questions for Don, feel free to type them into the comments section and we'll ask him here live. And also, all of Don's books are available on headlinebooks.com. So you can check out the website link there in the comments to purchase any of his books. He does lots of interviews and book signings throughout the state of West Virginia and beyond the state as well. And again, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, lots of those events have been canceled recently, which is again why we are doing this virtual book presentation instead. So going back to Vulture Bend, can you talk a little bit about the research that was involved with this novel?
Well, a lot of it is, a lot of research I did was for the geography of the places. Vulture Bend is the name of a place in the river, a very secluded place where a vulture colony lives. So, and we have one not far from my house. And the strange thing of we would go see you just drive down the street and you see all these vultures just all over the tree at night. And in the mornings, they come out and they'd spread their wings. I guess to warm up or get heat in their wings, but it was so eerie. I mean, they're just so strange creatures. And I thought, man, if there's ever a place to have a creature or to have murders or bodies dumped, this would be. They have these vultures around all over the place.
Great. So can you go a little bit deeper into the plot of Vulture Bend and your thoughts again about how you intertwined two very different concepts?
Okay, so the basic story is the guy, the main character Finn, he is a very smart, very adept person, but he's the basic, just doesn't fulfill up to his potential. He's just a guy that is funny, he's witty, he's just a little bit not what you'd want your daughter to marry. So he's having trouble, he's in trouble with the school, with his student teaching, and they give him to a very strict, he thinks she's going to be an old lady, an old strict lady, but they give him as a mentor this younger woman who has gone to the same school and has done really well. So there's a spark between them, and she doesn't want there to be a spark. He's just, he doesn't care about anything. So they kind of fall for each other. This is where the Stephen King part comes into it. He has just a touch of ESP. It's almost like, how right now, if you're sitting there right now, you can picture how a pizza smells. Mm-hmm. Well, he can picture what that person beside him is thinking. Not what they've remembered, can't read their minds, but if they're thinking something, it comes to him like a smell. So he meets this girl. They kind of settle. It's in and out, and finally they get together. I don't know how do I do this without telling too much of the story.
Don't tell that. Don't tell what happens at the end.
Okay, well they kind of get together. She gets attacked and beaten. The people in the town love her so much they think he did it because he kind of got framed. Mm-hmm. At the same time, he has to move away while she's in a coma. And at the same time, he moves to the secluded place where the serial killer has been dumping these bodies all of these years. And because he has this ESP, he's kind of getting feelings from the ground, from every place around this. Now, in this book, Led Zeppelin plays a huge part because the serial killer is part of what he does all the time, his ritual. He always plays Led Zeppelin music. So this guy Finn also plays the guitar. He, when he gets by himself, his favorite band plays Led Zeppelin, and it kind of raises these spirits because that's the last thing they heard before they died. And it sounds very far out there, but I think the story comes together so it makes more sense.
Yeah, and again, you don't want to give away too much. So something interesting about you, Don, is that you do write in multiple genres. Sometimes authors specifically write novels or they specifically write middle grade or only focus on children's books, but you really do write across all three of those. So can you talk a little bit about that and how your process might change from, jumping from novels down to children's books?
Well, I teach fourth grade. So there is a tremendous amount of really good books out there for kids. It's really good. Then I thought there are some that aren't that great that I thought I can do better than that. So that's kind of a heady thing to say, but thought of a story. I used to tell my kids when my daughters were little, I'd tell them stories at night. And then I thought, well, I'm going to start writing these down. So I wrote them down. They all kind of culminated around a little character called Inky. He was kind of the rock star of that of the era where there are knights and kings and castles and things like that. And 2 books came from that where he kind of solves problems because he's a curse was put on his father by a witch doctor. He's only 12 inches high. He shrunk down to 12 inches, and he only ages 1 year out of every 10. So he's like 60 years old, but he's really 600. So he's smart. He can do things. So that's how the middle book started. The picture book, which I'm finishing another right now, but the picture book started, uh, just because I was going to do a lot of school shows, I had a lot of books for, fourth grade, third grade, fourth grade, and up. But I didn't have anything for the smaller kids, and they were all so excited. They wanted something. I didn't want to just give them something that they'd have to wait several years to read. So I decided I'd just try to draw a book, and the drawings came out okay. So I went to the store and got a book on drawing, and then I bought all these watercolors and these paints, and I just wasn't working, just couldn't do it. So finally, I just went and got one of those plastic things that little kids have that have like 9 colors in them, the watercolors, and I did it with that, and it turned out well, and I was really happy with it. So the publisher was very happy with it, and right now it's probably my biggest selling book. I mean, the last time I checked, it was number 7 of the kids' books at Tamarack.
Oh, that's excellent. Yes, you're a big star at Tamarack. You do a lot of events there, really all year long when it's open outside of the pandemic right now. So hopefully you can get back to that soon, because I'm sure it is fun to be able to meet people and chat about your books. And again, you have something in every genre, so you can really satisfy any audience.
Yeah, the people down there have been so nice, and the Travel Plaza too. But it's kind of like going back and seeing people that work there. I mean, I consider them really good friends, and it's just fun to be with them too.
Yeah, and for those of you that are watching, just tuning in, we are chatting with Dawn Stansberry, award-winning author at Headline Books. And just a quick note for anybody listening who is not familiar with the state of West Virginia, Tamarack is a great artisan shopping area, and they've got wonderful restaurants, a wonderful restaurant inside, and there's several different galleries, so artists from across the state. It's a juried place, so you have to submit your work to be accepted. So Don has all of his books available for sale there, outside of Beckley. So it's again a wonderful spot to stop at if you're heading through the state. So talking about in-person events, Don, what's something that you really enjoy about being able to talk about your books again? Because you do school visits and you do workshops. So can you chat a little bit about what it's like to be in front of kids at a school and in front of larger audiences?
Well, it really helps boost your self-perception. I mean, people look at you in a little different way. That there's so many different kinds of authors, so many different kinds of illustrators. But I still have a hard time thinking of myself as an author. I don't feel worthy, because the guys that I read, I hold to such high esteem that I don't even think I should be mentioned. I shouldn't be mentioned with them. But it's great to get out and explain your ideas, or to see what catches people's attention. I've talked about certain ideas. Tamarack's a great place because there are people coming from all different states. It's kind of, people coming from north, going to the beaches, coming from the east, going to the west. It's just kind of a natural nexus of a place. So, I kind of bounce ideas off people. I was at Tamarack one time when I had the Krusty book, and I had some of the drawings. The book wasn't out yet, but I had some of the drawings, and I had them on my table with the other books. And a guy came up and said, "Oh, I see you have a septum sepalitis," or he gave some kind of Latin name. And I thought, "Oh, I drew this, but I don't know what it is." And I thought, I could get in trouble here, because this, somebody that knows, what do you call it, zoology or something, might know this from prehistoric times. So I had to go back, and we changed the first page to "on a planet far away." So I didn't have to go with the Earth stuff.
Yes.
But just little things like that, and I've heard some great stories from people that I would love to steal, but just heart-wrenching stories from some people that have come back from the war, and I think, well, sometimes I could work that in and make a great story and kind of give an homage to the people that have been through it. But yeah, it's really good to bounce ideas off people.
Oh yeah. So
especially people that don't really care about you. They can care whether they hurt your feelings or not, which is really good. It's what you need.
Yes, it is. So speaking of that, are you part of like a critique group or anything? Like, do you run your work by anybody, or does your publishing house predominantly serve as that to you?
Yeah, they predominantly serve. Now I have my wife read things sometimes. I've had other people read things just to see if it, what I really, my biggest thing is just I want to flow,
Mm.
just to make it sound smooth all the way through. Because sometimes I'll pick a book up or a manuscript up maybe 6 months, a year later, and start it over, and you just want to kind of want the flow to go the same. I'm working on several short stories now, which I'm starting to really like, because you can kind of just throw it there, then leave it. But yeah, again, I'm having people read some of those.
Yeah, yeah, it's always nice to get feedback again from people who don't particularly know you as like a friend, because they'll be more
Yeah.
honest if they don't like you or don't know
But,
you that well.
but I still find that most of my friends really don't care about hurting my feelings.
Yeah,
So
which
we're
is
good
good. You have honest friends. That's good. We do have a
there.
comment. We do have a comment from Facebook. Patty Wood says, "Hi, Dawn."
She's one of my favorite people.
Mine too.
Well, I hope
It's
she's
always
doing
nice.
okay. I miss her. Um, I hope we're going to be good for next year.
Absolutely. Same here. So one thing that you were a part of was the West Virginia Writing Project. Can you chat a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah, the writing project. 'Cause I was thinking about the West Virginia Writers Association, which I was part of both for a while.
Oh,
The writing project was one of the nicest things I've ever done. They select certain authors to come down. You teach a group of kids for a couple hours. You do, some lessons with them, and then you get a chance to go to a luncheon, and then you get a chance to sell your books. And it's kind of a award because these kids have all won writing contests.
mm-hmm.
So it's not like you have a bunch of kids that don't know what you go through to write. I mean, they have been through the process, even if it's not, the same, but they've been through their own process. So it was really nice for me. I mean, it was one of the best things that I've done, and sold out of books, and got to meet the parents, got to do little things with them. And it's really a great opportunity for kids and for authors too.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's just wonderful to show kids in West Virginia and wherever that this is possible. Like you can be an author, you can be an illustrator, you can go into this. So speaking of that, you actually did do a collaboration project with a school, skipping through the ABCs of history, where you wrote it with a group of school children. Can you talk a little bit about that collaboration?
Yeah, that was a great thing, and that all came from the book Krusty. Um, because that I did show that we could, had a little bit of ability in drawing. Again, and also through Tamarack, because one of the principals at this school saw one of the headline book's other publications, which was a school kind of based book, and they needed something for a fundraiser and also to kind of raise their scores. So what we put together was a package where they did the history, the social studies history, in an ABC version for a book. So there was something like 400, 600 kids in the school. Every kid had a picture in the book, which was really great, but it was really a nightmare for the publishers who had great patience. And but they, it's very smart, because if you want it for a fundraiser, every kid that has a picture in a book is going to buy a copy. So they already had so many sold before it even started. Plus, that school, I think that year, they raised their social studies and their reading scores double digits in their CHIPA tests. So it was a great thing. What we wanted to do was maybe go to the State Board of Education and have that book put in every school, every classroom, which would have been huge. But one of the people that was kind of spearheading that project got sick. I mean, really sick. And it just kind of fell apart right there. But we did make a lot of money for school and raise their scores, and the kids loved it. I got to be there for several days and go to every class, and we worked on stuff, and we had fun. It was fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. And again, it just shows kids that there's endless possibilities with writing. So I think that's, it's great to show them that when they're in elementary school. So we were chatting before we started that you had chosen a few passages from your books to read to our audience today. Do you want to go ahead and do that?
I could do that. Which would you like first?
Let's start with Secret Blood. So again, for those of you just joining us, we are chatting with Don Stansberry, an award-winning Headline Books author. Today we're talking specifically about his novels, Secret Blood and Vulture Bend. And if you would like a copy of either of those or any of his other books in his middle grade or children's book genres, then you can go to headlinebooks.com and find your books there. So Don is going to read a little passage from Secret Blood for us, and then we'll have him read one from Vulture Bend as well.
Okay, so this is kind of, I don't know if you're supposed to do this or not, but I'm starting kind of in the middle of the chapter. This is where the priest and two of the gang members are meeting Emmanuel for the first time. They don't know what to think. The priest does not think he's worthy. The gang members have no idea what's going on. They just know that they've been allowed to go through police escorts, and now they're going to a military base to pick him up secretly. Okay?
Okay.
We followed the road marked C until we came to a brilliantly lighted area. As the soldier said, there was a chain-link fence with a substantial gate at the end of the runway. I'd imagined a military airbase to be a beehive of activity, with jeeps and army trucks and people around. But this place was deserted. Light towers similar to the ones at high school football stadiums bathed everything for hundreds of yards. The landing strip had been plowed, but everything else was still under several inches of snow. There were no footprints or tire tracks anywhere. The scene was eerie, as all busy places are when no one's around. The bright lights reflected off the white snow and accentuated the complete absence of life. We waited. Shine sat motionless as if he could sit for hours. Simon fiddled with the radio until he found a song by the Jackson 5. Shine's fingers tapped on the steering wheel. This is sure out of the way. I hope they know we're here, I said. They know, Shine said. Got cameras at the top of 2 fence posts. He nodded at 2 areas, one to the right and one to the left. Looks like your boy coming in now, Simon said. A light, looking as small and bright as a star, appeared in the distance. It circled back and began its descent. A row of landing lights glinted to life in the middle of the landing strip. By the time we could actually make out the shape of the plane, the landing gear was out and the tail was dropping. The snow along the edges of the strip swirled as the plane's wingtips passed. It roared past us as it touched down and reversed its engines. Even with the snow softening the sound, it was loud. It rolled out of sight as it continued decelerating. Shine gripped the steering wheel while Simon readjusted the radio. I fidgeted as I waited for the plane to return. Simon couldn't wait to see who was going to get off, and Shine just sat there staring forward. Finally, it taxied up and stopped at the gate. Too close, I thought, for a plane that size. The engines whined down. Almost before the plane stopped moving, a door opened and a man stepped out onto the tarmac. He walked toward us, holding an envelope against his side. He was wearing a green flight suit and a helmet, the straps hanging loose at the bottom. I slid my door back and hopped out onto the tarmac in the chilly air. As I did, the gate magically rolled open and the soldier stepped through. Good evening, Father, he said, while extending his hand. Is everything in order? I suppose so. I'm not sure what you mean. I'm not sure either. I guess I just wanted to be sure he's in good hands. This is a little irregular. Well, I can assure you he's with friends, I said, still a little puzzled. Yes, sir. He handed me the envelope under his arm. He's just such a good guy. I've spent the last few hours with him and I don't know. He's really easy to talk to. He began walking to the plane, then stopped and looked back at me. There was something else he wanted to say, but I could tell in that instant he wasn't going to say it. I didn't want him to say anything. I wanted him to act as though this was just another package being delivered. I wanted the next person to get off the plane to look chubby and blonde and goofy. I felt scared and blasphemous and unworthy. I started my mantra. It's really not him. It's really not him. But it wasn't working. The soldier was walking him to me. He was wrapped up in a red microfiber parka, jeans and army boots. Looped over one shoulder was a rolled backpack made of what looked like canvas. He looked like George Harrison off the White Album. As they came closer, I could see he was very tan and his hair was dark and shoulder length. Father, this is Emmanuel, the soldier said. I stared into his eyes. I couldn't help it. They were so deep and dark and wise, I could barely lift my hand to shake his. He took it in his. I'll never forget on that cold night in that empty airfield, the warmth of his handshake, the sincerity of his eyes. I struggled to say something. Welcome, was all I could manage. He released my hand and broke the spell. I'm sure you'd like to get out of the cold weather after coming from Africa, I said. It is much different than what I'm used to, he said in a deep voice. It wasn't just deep, it was commanding. He turned to the soldier and shook his hand. Thank you for your kindness, Tom, and I'll pray for your sister, he said. Tom nodded and walked to the plane. Our car is over here. I motioned to the van. In Africa, we call that a van, he said with a smile. It wasn't a smart comment. He was just trying to put me at ease, and it worked. I guess that's what we call them here too, I said. Shine and Simon watched as we approached. I slid open the door and we got in. These are my friends, Shine and Simon, I said. Simon turned to get a better look. Damn, man, you look like Jesus Christ. I was horrified. I glanced at Emmanuel, but he was smiling. Did he know who he was or who he wasn't? I've been told that a few times, he said. Shine turned the van around, swinging the headlight beams across the pristine white snow, leaving the plane behind us. Suddenly, the radio volume increased, and Spirit in the Sky came on. Where are we headed? Shine asked. I gave him the address. It's the CDC, I said. The CDC? Simon asked. We got a secret man from Africa, and we headed to a disease center? Oh, Lord, what have we gotten ourselves into? You have no idea, I thought to myself.
That's great. All right, so again, for anybody just joining us, we are chatting on the Headline Books Zoom into Books program with award-winning Headline Books author Don Stansberry. So now if you could read an excerpt from Vulture Bend, that would be
okay. I've got one where the couple meet for the first time.
Okay.
Okay?
Go for it.
We getting word from outer space or something? We getting word from the control?
Yes, we are good to go. You may continue.
Okay, so like I say, the Finn's in trouble with the school. He's meeting his mentor. The building was a glass and brick modern design with attractive landscape. Even though it was 2 stories high, it looked low and comfortable, settled among the hills. I could see a figure moving inside the building, just behind the steel and glass security doors. I hopped out, got my official-looking briefcase out of the back seat, and headed toward the doors. It was January and bitterly cold, but all I could find to wear that morning was a zippered sweatsuit top. The wind was stinging my face and making my eyes water. I started to jog. She moved to the door with a set of keys in her hands, but instead of unlocking, she stood there with her hands on her hips and looked at me through the glass. You're late, she said. You're not dressed appropriately. What? He said 12:30. I'm 15 minutes early. I lied. There was also a traffic accident. She was the opposite of what I had predicted. Green eyes and chestnut hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore trendy jeans and a nice-fitting pink sweater, the perfect girl next door. We stared at each other through the glass. She was only a couple inches shorter than me. My ears were beginning to sting from the cold. Your hair is a little long for student teaching, and why are you not dressed appropriately? She sipped something out of what looked like a mug of hot chocolate. I didn't expect to be outside very long. Mr. Fleshman said that you're trouble, she said, taking another sip. No, I just got started on the wrong foot. I haven't got a feeling for this yet. I was starting to shake and she could see it. You know, we had a class together a couple years ago, but you probably wouldn't remember. You only showed up half the time. Changed man, I said. I'm ready to teach the youth of America about, stuff. I'll be happy to help you as long as you try, she said. A leaf flew across the sidewalk and over my shoes. Cross my heart, I said, and made a little X on my chest. She still didn't move. Little gold earrings dangled just below her earlobes. She had excellent earlobes. Come on, I'm freezing out here. She waited another couple seconds, then inserted the key. I stepped in and she locked the door behind me. I offered her my hand and she shook it formally. Call me Finn, I said. Annie, she said, your hands are cold. I'm cold all over, I said. She looked me over again like she was examining a dissected science experiment. Let's go down to my classroom and you can look at my lesson plans and see if we can find something to warm you up. She started walking away. Well, maybe you could give me your sweater, I said. She turned with a slightly tilted head and gave me a look. I raised my hands in resignation and brought an imaginary zipper across my lips and threw it away. I got the look again, but this time there was the slightest twinkle in her eyes. I would have bet she was smiling when she turned away from me. I followed her down a series of hallways. She walked very well. She had a spark about her, a deep undercurrent of sexuality that was purposely hidden or just unannounced. I decided right then and there that I might just enjoy this mentoring process.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Again, everyone, we've been chatting with Dawn Stansberry, award-winning author from Headline Books. You can purchase any of Dawn books at headlinebooks.com. The link is in the comments there. So once again, Dawn, fantastic job. Thank you so much for joining us on Zoom Into Books. And for those of you out there, if you missed part of the presentation today, you can watch it again here on Facebook. We also have a Zoom Into Books YouTube channel just titled Zoom Into Books. So be sure to subscribe to that, and you can see the rest of our videos that we've been presenting throughout the whole pandemic here. So the pandemic has led to some amazing new inventions, you know?
Well, I've always had great adventures with Headline Books, and I appreciate you making this so easy for me.
Oh, anytime, Dawn. Fantastic job. Again, thank you so much again for joining us. It was great.
Thank you all.